Welcome to the Garden Talk podcast, where we interview growers from all over the world, both beginners and experts, seeking to learn more about what they know about gardening and how they do things in their garden. What's up, everybody? For those of you that don't know me, my name is Chris, aka Mr. Grow It, and you're tuned into the Garden Talk podcast. This is episode number 167. In this episode, I interview Thomas Gibson, also known as Grandmaster Level. He has been gardening for over 30 years and is the founder and CEO of Grandmaster LEDs. Thomas has extensive knowledge when it comes to lighting for plants, and that's what we're going to get into in today's episode. He talks about spectrum tuning, HPS versus LED, UVC light, Under-Canopy lighting, and more. If you want to see short clips of these podcast episodes, search Garden Talk Clips on YouTube. I also have a gardening channel where I show the plants that I grow. Both of those channels will be linked down in the YouTube description section below. One of my goals for this podcast is to bring free information about gardening to the general public. That being said, I'd like to thank the sponsors of today's episode who help make that goal possible. Thanks to AC Infinity for sponsoring this episode. Check out their humidifiers, which can help increase the humidity in your grow space. Their humidifiers have 10 different levels and smart control features such as VPD and humidity programming, so you can get precise humidity control. Click the link in the description section below so you can learn more about their humidifiers, and the discount code MrGrowIt15 works on both Amazon and their website, acinfinity.com. Stash Blend. Several additives in one blend, so you no longer have to buy individual bottles. Check it out at stashblend.com, link in the description section below, and use the discount code THESTASH. Mars Hydro. Check out their complete grow tent kits, which include not only the grow light and tent, but also small accessories such as clip fans, glasses, and trimmers. You can also customize your own kit based on your actual needs and preferences. Also, keep an eye out for their 420 sale, which will be launching very soon. Go to their website at mars-hydro.com to see all of their deals. I'll link it in the description section below, and you can use the discount code MrGrowIt to save even more. And we are back, and I'm joined with Thomas, also known as Grandmaster Level. How you doing today?
Awesome. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. You are the founder, CEO of Grandmaster LEDs. And before that, I've known you since 10 plus years now. I feel like you've been doing the YouTube thing and content creation. I know you ran commercial facilities and hundreds of lights and all that stuff. So I know you have a very extensive background, really focusing in on lighting, which is what we're going to get into today. A variety of topics when it comes to lighting. But first, before we get too deep into the things, can you give us an introduction? Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into gardening.
Sure. Well, my name's Thomas Gibson. I'm based out of Vancouver Island, British Columbia. I've been doing this basically my whole life. My first outdoor medicinal crop was when I was 13. My first indoor was by the time I was 16. By the time I was 21, I would have anywhere from 9 to 10 places going for almost 2 decades, where there'd be anywhere from 200 to 500 lights. So I've done this just my whole life. I got into this originally to make money, and I came from a very, very poor background, but developed a passion. I love the plant, and I just love growing.
Awesome. And what's your overall style of growing? Are you indoors mostly or outdoors as well? Are you in soil, cocoa, organic, synthetic? What's your style?
Well, for majority of my commercial career would have been pro mix with I would actually add a lot of perlite. And in the beginning, I think it would be more synganic for the first 10 years. With a lot of, I had a partner that really liked using a lot of organic amendments. And then it was more a synthetic thing. I've dabbled with almost everything, going back into 2001. I can remember having Rockwool, playing with that, where we would have flood and drain systems, drip systems, even an aeroponic setup. So I've tried a lot of different stuff. Right now, these days, I just have a medical, and I've been experimenting with cocoa, and it was actually kind of a hard transition for me, just because with soil, the dry back is so important in my opinion. And if you try to water something when it's oversaturated in soil, you can have a real negative effect versus in cocoa, where it likes it and it can take it. And so I've been having fun just playing with it. And I like the automation side of things, where it doesn't require nearly as much time.
There are so many different ways to grow, and I talk about in my content often where it just makes it fun. Being able to do things different ways. For me personally, if I was doing the same thing over and over again, I'd go crazy. So I personally am kind of like you, where I've experimented with a bunch of different ways to do it, and kind of narrowed in on these days I'm kind of narrowing in on the organic, all natural side of things and soil. But yeah, I do still do have synthetic grows here and there, and I did DWC recently for the first time and grown for 14 years and grew DWC for the first time, just trying to keep things fresh, and it really just makes things real fun.
Absolutely. Well, there's 100 different ways to get across the finish line. It's like, do what's best for you. I always tell people, it's like, if you've got something that's really working that well, then I wouldn't really change it. You know what I mean? If you're getting those results that you need, just ignore everybody else and just keep on going straight forward with it.
I completely agree with you. All right, let's dive into lighting. This is something that you have a lot of knowledge on for many, many years. I think we should kind of warp back in time a little bit to begin. And before we get into the first topic, which is going to be the HPS to LED evolution, I just want to mention to the folks that are tuning in on the podcast platforms that there are visuals for this episode. So if you want to head on over to YouTube, just search Garden Talk with Mr. Grow It. That channel will pop up and you'll be able to tune into this episode with Grandmaster Level and then see the visuals that he's going to present to us today. So I'm going to give you the mic, and I know there's a couple things that you want to talk about regards to HPS versus LED, so break it down for us.
Perfect. Let me just quickly share my screen here. So the first thing that I'm showing here is a picture of double-ended HPS spectrum. And I would ask people, a lot of people think this isn't a unique spectrum, and I actually think it is actually very unique. What is unique about it? Well, we can see that there's 3.96% blue. That's in the range between 400 and 500 nanometer, which is very, very rare if you're comparing to any type of LED. The green is actually pretty standard. 33% is a normal number, anywhere between 30 and 40%. So there isn't really anything too special about that. Next is the red. And I like to ask this question, is all red really red? So from a scientific standpoint, from people that are leading the world in R&D, they're going to say, yes, it is. From someone that's got 20 years of commercial cultivation, I'm going to say no. And there is a big difference between 600 and 620 nanometer. So you'll see this is like if you look where the red peak is, and when you think about HPS, you see like an amber color that kind of comes off that isn't the same as the red, the other type of red that's 660 nanometer. And so I think that that's one big thing to point out that people have to take into consideration. And what I have seen, and I'm not saying that one is better than the other. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that it's a different temperature light. So to get the same results with a different temperature, it's going to be very hard. Now, some do give you almost some of the same results. The next thing about this light that is unique is the amount of far red. There's 10.48%. Most lights have under 2 or 1% far red. And most companies don't actually even add far red diodes into the light. Why? Far red diodes are the most expensive, and they hurt your efficiency. So it kind of you're adding a big cost, and it's going to hurt your efficacy number. After LEDs had been on the scenes for a few years, this is what it's kind of evolved into. And this is like a 38K spectrum. And to make this kind of spectrum, there's lots of different ways to make spectrums, first of all. There are no spectrums that are proprietary. So if anybody says that they've got a proprietary spectrum, that's incorrect. Anybody can take any light and stick it into an integrated sphere and get a report, and that shows the balance of blue, red, far red, green, and you can match anything. So that's one thing to take into consideration. So this is what everything kind of evolved into, and I think it's a pretty rock solid spectrum, and it probably varied anywhere from 3800K to 3500K, and people would usually make these type of spectrums with using white diodes, usually a 1-to-1 ratio of like 3000 and 5000 Kelvin, and adding 660 nanometer. And they didn't add 730, and there was very little 730 in it. So then after a few more years went by, this is what things have evolved into, and this is what I would consider a heavy deep red 660 nanometer spectrum. What is the big difference? Well, you can see that you've got this big massive red spike that is kind of dominating everything. If we just go back for a second, and you can just see about how much fuller the other spectrum is. And this is what things have really evolved into. And I think what like what people are, I would say majority of the larger companies have gone in this direction when they're using single channel lights. And why are they doing that? In my opinion, it's to have a higher efficacy, to be more efficient. When you add the 660 nanometer diode, it's more efficient than any other diode. So it brings your numbers up and it allows you to hit 3 micromoles per joule, which is, it's very easy to hit if you're using a bunch of red diodes. But if you're trying to hit that number with white diodes, it's actually very hard to hit. And you have to use a great number of diodes. So basically that's what things have evolved into. So when we have people that are coming from HBS to LED, you can see that this is what they're basically looking at. And they're like, a lot of people come and they're not getting the same results and they're upset and they're saying, oh, LED is bunk and this is, and HBS produces so much better. And the real gap is the temperature of the light. Now, like if you look, one of them's got 20% blue versus 4% blue. And like, which on so many different cultivars can change the structure of the medicinal flowers. And it, like we've seen stuff where it can actually, we can see stuff where it looks like it's from a completely different planet. And then we've seen stuff that looks the same, but has different COAs, different properties. So it's really like, am I saying one is better than the other? I'm saying that there's a lot of cultivars that like a warmer spectrum, but there's also a lot of cultivars that like a cooler spectrum. To be able to say that one spectrum is the best spectrum, I don't believe you can do that, because to find out what the true genetic potential, you have to test it. And cultivars can act completely different. So then next, this is a regular double-ended HPS versus the warm white channel that we've made in one of our spectrum tuning lights. And you can see that the temperature is almost the same. Like the only thing that's really different is there's 5.3% far red. And when the double-ended HBS has 10.4%, and the blue, there's slightly more blue. But we can actually adjust that and add it to balance everything, so it's actually the same. So I believe if you want to get HBS results under LED, you need to use the same temperature. We have tested multiple different side-by-sides and seen very similar results. A lot of people like to throw out radiant heat and say, it's the radiant heat that's making this difference. And that I completely disagree. When you're going and transitioning from HBS to LED, you want to actually keep the same surface leaf temperature. So to achieve that, you actually want to go to a successful HBS room if you're trying to get those same results and figure out what the hottest point is. So as soon as the AC is going to turn on, you're going to know that that's the hottest point of the room. So you can run into the room and take a bunch of surface leaf temperature readings and say, this is my hottest point. Now, when the AC turns off, I have the coolest point. Now I know what that range is. Now I can go into my LED room and adjust my ambient temperature until I'm hitting that range. Trying to go by ambient temperature is like shooting yourself in the foot, because it depends if you have it higher up, one higher up than the other one, it could be totally different because heat rises. And so I think everything should always go by surface leaf temperature. You should never go by an ambient temperature because it can really screw with your mind. With spectrum tuning, like if someone is going to want a spectrum tune, they should ask themselves, are they trying to grow the highest quality possible? And if that is the quest, if that is your goal, then yes, absolutely, spectrum tuning is going to be the answer. And the other question is, are you trying to find the true genetic potential? Well, without spectrum tuning, it's going to be almost impossible. Like, what are the major, there's 3 major benefits to spectrum tuning that I see. And that is being able to use blue to tighten your internode spacing as much as possible. And secondly, to be able to use blue at any time to limit your stretch as much as possible. So a lot of people are tent growers. If you're in a tent and you might be limited in height, the ability to use the extra blue is life-changing. Then the ability to add blue later on for the last few weeks of the flower is also life-changing. And it can, for increasing your COAs, it's just, it's undeniable the results that you can get.
There's a couple things that stick out on the charts that you had shown, which is the double-ended HPS slide, 3.96% blue. I didn't realize, because I've grown with HPS before, I didn't realize it was that low in blue. I feel like these days, many fixtures are in between like the 15 and 20% range of blue. So that kind of is one thing that stuck out to me. The other thing that really stuck out to me was I wasn't aware that 660 nanometers was the highest efficiency for lowest cost. I think knowing that information and seeing the different lighting companies out there, you can tell who is just going after trying to make things kind of more price efficient, I guess you could say.
Absolutely. Like, I think it's a big problem because, like, especially when I think about growers and people that are buying something that's going to be lasting them for 5 years. If their goal is to be like the sun, you definitely want the fuller spectrum. And like, now I'd like to kind of explain what is spectrum tuning, because it can kind of be confusing. What is a spectrum tuning light? Well, a spectrum tuning light usually consists of 4 different channels. So one of those channels is going to be warm white, which I like to reference as like a HPS spectrum. And then a cool white, I reference it as a metal halide, but it might not be appropriate because a metal halide will actually have way less blue and a lot of other stuff in it. So I just referenced it as metal halide because it's a blue color to your eye. So it has way more blue than a metal halide, and that is your cool white channel. Then you have a deep red channel that is 660 nanometer that we were talking about, that's highly efficient. And then we have a far red channel. So you have these 4 different channels. You can do it all different types of ways. We like to do it with 4 independent drivers. And we have lights that are up to 1500 watts, and you use them together to make all different spectrums. Like, a lot of people get so confused about 1500 watts. You still only need to run it at 600 to 750 watts. That extra wattage is actually for the diversity. So that's kind of what a spectrum tuning light is. And we're the first company that's actually simplified spectrum tuning by making 2-channel spectrum tuning lights. So we basically have taken the warm white, and instead of having a deep red and far red controlled independently, we have fixed it on the warm white channel. So we put it at safe levels where you couldn't do anything to ever hurt yourself. Now, when you have a 4-channel light, there are things that you could do to hurt yourself by using too much far red or too much deep reds in certain situations. Well, when you have it on the light like that and it's fixed, it's basically simplified where you can't do anything wrong to hurt yourself, which I think is kind of it's the future. Like, when you have a light that can do 500 spectrums or 60 spectrums, it's like, well, which spectrum do you want to do? And it's like, this really simplifies it, takes it down to about 12 spectrums. Like, it's actually capable of way more than 12 technically, but that visually look a lot different on paper. It's about 12, and you can still have the benefits of going from 2000 Kelvin to 9000 Kelvin. So that's basically like a 2-channel spectrum tuning light. And then what are regular lights? Regular lights are single channel lights that have 1 driver. And it can be confusing for people, so I've been kind of trying to just break things down as much as possible. So as we've been developing it, I'm actually going to share my screen here again because we actually haven't published this publicly, but we are about to publish it. And it's it's not showing the whole picture. It's cut off. But anyways, it's supposed to say Transcend Light Recipe. And this is something that we've developed, and we're just getting ready to publish the results. But I'm working with a company in Canada that just finished their 4th crop with consecutive making 20% plus gains on terpenes and THC. So it's life-changing here in Canada for people. And like we've seen multiple people do it 1 or 2 crops, but this is 4 crops in a row where he had already had 20 different COAs with this previous cultivar. So for us to make a 20% gain, and also it's not like we're just using one lab, because anybody can say one thing with one lab. We're using multiple labs, and this is actually been being exported to Germany. And in Germany and Australia are known for having the toughest labs. So basically, we have conclusively proven that you can gain a 20% plus gain by doing this formula. And it's just as simple as vegging in 9000K to have the tightest internode spacing as possible. And then when you're coming into when you transition into the flower stage, you're using a whole bunch of cool white and warm white, and you leave it like that until your stretch is done. And then we transition to a spectrum that's actually even warmer than HBS slightly. And we basically use that until there's 3 weeks left and you start introducing the blue back in. So you can see we've dampened, or we lower the far red when there's 3 weeks left, and we go back to heavy blue and warm white. And we with 2 weeks left, we even reduced the warm white and completely eliminate the far red. And in the last week, we're finishing in 9,000 Kelvin. And there's a lot of people that finish with 10,000 Kelvin when they're not growing with LED. And there's a reason why they do it. Is the plants love the blue. It's almost like a stress response. It's almost the same thing that UV does, and it allows them to enhance the THC and terpenes.
I like how you broke it down between different phases of growth and what channels they should have on. That was going to be a question for you that I was going to ask was, if I were to buy one of light a 4-channel, what do I run when? And so it's really cool that you actually have that broken down already, and you've done testing and have results that show what you can get out of it. So that's really cool.
Yeah, there's also another company multiple companies, but one in particular that we've been working with that they're really finding out what the true genetic potential is. And like I said, we've seen stuff in the same room under different spectrums look like it's from a different planet. So what they do with a test room, they have a test room where they have curtains in between the light, so they can't have crossover. And they'll run a cultivar with 4 completely different spectrums. And when you are comparing spectrums, one thing I want to bring up is you want to have a big difference. When you only have a couple percent, you will not see any difference. So if you just try to add 2% blue or something like that, you're not going to see really a difference from everything that we have seen. So basically, they're running the 4 different cultivars, seeing which one performs the best, getting a COA, and then implementing that as their base spectrum, and still using the blue with it. So it's like that, and that's how I was trying to say is if you're trying to find the real, true genetic potential, that's how you have to do it. Like we're using more blue than what the sun has. Like the blue, like the sun is, depending on where you are and located on the earth, is like around 25 to 30% maximum, and we're able to get it up to closer to 37%, and just and which I think is a pretty big deal, because when you're using 37% blue and you're also omitting the 54% red that the sun really has, you can do stuff that you can't do outside, which I think is really taking things to the next level.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. Now, when you showed the HPS, a double-ended HPS slide, I want to warp back to that for 1 second. One of the things that it shows is that there's a spike at 780 nanometers. And talking with growers in the past, people swear that, hey, this is the reason why HPS shows different results, because of that spike on the end. What's your take on that?
So that is infrared, so it's heat, actually. So I disagree, and I understand why people think that, because I could go back to that picture where it's showing the HP, what the new evolved LED versus the HPS, and the temperature is so different. So they think that, hey, I've tried everything to match it the same, and I can't get the same results. It has to be the infrared heat. Except for anyone that is saying that, I can guarantee they've never tried an LED light with the same temperature and match those same surface leaf temperatures. One of the other huge problems with transitioning from a large HPS room, a lot of people overlook this. They'll take out all their HPS and they put in their LEDs, and now their HVAC system is completely oversized, and it's turning on and off very quickly. Well, an HVAC is like a big, massive dehumidifier that you want sized perfectly to be as efficient and it also helps hold the temperature. But you actually can have a really hard time running LEDs if it gets too cold. Also, so like your surface leaf temperature is really important. But if people are having cycles that is bringing their surface leaf temperature down to 73 or 75 Fahrenheit, that's a really big problem, especially in the earlier stages. In the later stages, it can actually be an SOP to kind of lower the temperature as you're going on.
Got it. That makes sense. One more question about spectrum before we move on. So I have a lot of folks here that know of Dr. Bruce Bugbee. He is a very knowledgeable guy, Utah State University, has been working in the industry for over 40 years, very knowledgeable about lighting. One of the things he had mentioned in one of his videos is something along, I don't have an exact quote, but something along the lines of PAR matters more than spectrum. I want to get your take on that.
Yeah, I agree with that statement, but I think that's a pretty wide open thing to say, because let's compare PAR at 100% versus a optimized spectrum at 10% or even 50%. Well, we can't compete with that PAR. So I completely agree with that. PAR is more important. But when we're talking about 5% efficiency, well, here's the actual thing is in today's age, you actually don't have to sacrifice efficiency when you're spectrum tuning. You're actually gaining efficiency. And the reason, I'm going to say in 95% or more cases you are, because efficiency is usually gained. Well, there's some major things that play a role in it. The diodes, the bin of the diodes, the quantity of the diodes, the driver that you're using, the efficiency on the driver. Obviously, the heat sinks and everything play a role too, but mainly it's the driver and the diodes and the quantity. So that's going to play basically a major role. When you have spectrum tuning lights, I'll give you an example. Like we have a light that's got 5,310 diodes and one that's got 5,600, and we've got ones in the 4,000s. Well, a lot of single channel lights and most single channel lights have around a couple thousand. Like there are some that have up to a 3,000, but most of them are like a couple thousand. So when you have over double the diodes or more, you're actually running way cooler. It's going to have a way longer life. And it's going to be more efficient. In most cases, you're going to do other, like if you wanted to replicate somebody else's spectrum, you could do it, but more efficiently. So, but I do agree, PAR is more important. But when we get to like a few percent, if we're trading 5%, I believe that the optimized spectrum, like if I could choose between a blurple spectrum or an optimized one and have 5% less efficiency, like in 2025, quality is the most important factor. It's got to come first over efficiency.
I completely agree with you. So I want to transition over to UVC now. This is something that has been being used more and more in indoor grow rooms, not for particular to initiate more plant growth per se, but more for pest prevention and elimination. Can you talk to us about that?
Yes. Well, first off, I think in the next few years, UVC will replace 90 to 95% of all pesticides and predator bugs. So absolutely, UV can be used to combat bugs, to fight mold, and to enhance THC and terpenes. So this has been a long thing that took us a really long time to develop what's called the tarantula predator. And it's basically a UVC light that's used to fight bugs is the main reason. And, we've had a lot of R&D on it and things have evolved a lot, but it's evolved to the point where it's immunity to thrips is what we call it. So if you've got a thrip infestation, you can wipe them out in a little over a week by using 10 watts per 16 square feet for 15 minutes a day. And which is, it's pretty crazy because in all my experience, it's impossible to do. Like to be able to beat thrips without a pesticide or predator bugs. We actually experimented with, because we've done a lot of controlled experiments where we're introducing thrips, spider mites, and all that types of stuff. So we try to combat thrips with predator bugs. And like one of the biggest, Cucumaris, Swirsky, Hypoacis are three huge ones. And then I forget, the pirate bug is another one. But anyways, we'd ask what the recommended amount would be, and we would order 4 times the amount and introduce them to the room and not be able to beat thrips. Like maybe control them a little bit, but when you can compare the efficacy, it's not even close. We actually believe that using UVC for 5 minutes a day has a higher efficacy than using 6 or 7 different predator bugs as a prevention. So it's not a cure to everything. Like when we actually, our very first test that we did, we actually beat spider mites when we were introducing 2 to 3. And then we got into tests where we're introducing hundreds. And we weren't able to beat spider mites when we were introducing hundreds to a plant and letting them establish for 36 hours, but we were able to slow them down by easily 90%. So like we have footage of what they can do in 36 hours and then treating it for 10 minutes a day and then jumping ahead a week later and being able to see the difference. And it's really life-changing. It basically breaks the rules of growing. When we were developing everything, I think that there's a lot of bad information out there. Now, UVC can be extremely dangerous, but so can sticking your hand in a blender while it's turned on. So if anything can be really dangerous. And I think that so many people have been scared about, or scared from all this bad information about it. With actually other people's bad research slowed down our stuff. Well, it's not even bad research. We came across people actually faking their research. And the reason why we tried simulating exactly what they were doing, they were showing spider mite infestations with webbing and then showing it 7 days later clean and showing that they were only using the light for a minute. So that was a big obstacle because we were trying these treatments and not able to beat everything. And we're like, okay, well, this person is clearly faking their research and that's why you don't know about them. So we had to go outside the box and we started increasing things. And when we actually first started using UVC, we were beating thrips by, I would say, 97 to 98% using a 5-minute treatment in the middle of darkness. And people say middle of darkness, they think, oh, herming, and they get scared. It's not enough wattage to wake up the plants. And the light emits out, and it's like a big spotlight for insects to come in, and they're attracted to it. So that's kind of the theory on how it kind of works. Well, at 5 minutes a day, we were in the top 33 to 30 inches. It would be hard to find any thrip damage. You could only find stuff kind of underneath where the lights aren't being treated, or stuff where it was off to the side. And it was really what happened is I had decided I wanted to try stressing the plants with UVC to enhance THC and terpenes, and I decided to do 2 15-minute treatments to see what would happen. Well, 6 days later, there were no more thrips, and we could not find them anywhere. There's an IPM specialist named Matthew Gates who's based out of California. We flew him down to come in and inspect the room just to see if he could find any thrips. And, he spent a couple hours in the room, and he was able to kind of see the footage too of when they were introduced and everything. He wasn't being able to find anything. And also there's a fellow who's got a YouTube channel named BC Bubbleman. We had known each other for a long time, but we've kind of started hanging out from that point. He takes a lot of macro footage, and he made inventor of the bubble bags. And so he makes a lot of water hash. So he had a big interest in trying to see if he could find any bug poo or anything left over from any type of the thrips on any of the flower, and he wasn't able to. And after we had that crop, we know that, hey, we have broken the rules of growing, because I've been at this my whole life, and you've never been able to do this previously. And that's where and then we also had something else happen that was an accident. We had a timer fail, and I came into a room and had all the plants just totally messed up, and the lights were way underneath. They weren't even really close to it. And that's when we discovered that the UV, it's almost like systemically going into the stem and able to stress out the whole plant. And we believe playing with these limits are going to be able to push plants to be able to get a higher terpene and THC levels. Like when you use UVA, I supplied a lot of lighting for a lot of different side-by-sides where people are going UVA versus not. And then they also did UVB versus not. And it was very conclusive that the UVB had such a higher efficacy where you saw a real gain on the COA, where UVA was almost not nearly as much. There's just so little UVA, just in the, even for example, in HPS, there's less than 0.2% UVA. So I think that the real gain is using UVB or UVC for the future to actually push the limits of real COAs, just to kind of push the absolute boundaries of it. I believe anybody that's telling you not to use it has never done any real research, and they're just repeating what other people have said about it.
That's awesome. So UVC, you said 5 minutes per day. What is the size of these lights and wattage, and where do you position the lights?
So we actually came up with an idea to make them float underneath. We actually have a utility patent that allows them to you can get them at any level. So for every light that you have up above, you have 2 5-watt strips that are 44 inches long, and they're basically kind of floating underneath the canopy. And they spin 360 degrees, and you can kind of get them anywhere you want. With bad spider mite infestations, we like to bring the fight right to them and getting the lights as close as possible. With thrips, you actually don't need to. On the very first crop that I had, and I was experimenting, I was chasing the thrips around, trying to get the lights as close to anywhere where I saw it and moving them constantly, where then, at the very end, we accidentally wiped them out. And then we just tried using that from underneath and discovered we don't even have to. We just have to have them mounted underneath. It's I thought at first, I remember asking Matthew Gates, I'm like, do thrips have ears? Is this UV putting off a sound? Because we know that, the first 6 inches is where it really penetrates, but for whatever reason, it's able to give the effect where it eradicates them. We're working with multiple universities on white paper, so we're going to have a lot of real data. So right now, that's just a theory. I didn't know what was happening. I can't even explain. On the very first crop, I actually thought that we disabled them from being able to reproduce, and then they died out. And they just died out by the end, is what I thought. But then we just have too many examples of just coming in and cleaning out a room that's got a bad thrip infestation in 8 days. So it's just super effective against them. I think it's like almost like the cure for cancer for plants, because even if to be able to slow down, like to mess up a plant's or a insect's DNA and RNA, because when you screw up the RNA, it's like how they're thinking and how they're communicating and how they don't act normally after their RNA is screwed up. So we have some really cool documentation of, after treating spider mites, and you see them after before they've been treated, and then you see them 7 days later, and they're just all sitting there, all slow. They're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, setting up shop and just going like crazy. So it's pretty incredible. I actually think it's a lot bigger than medicinal plants. I think like food crops, stuff like for like greenhouses, and strawberries, that type of stuff. It's going to be huge. It's going to make an impact on eliminating pesticides, or like playing a critical role in it.
So that sounds like a complete game changer for sure. Now, I personally struggle with fungus gnats. Does this work on fungus gnats too?
Well, we've had a lot of reports of it being extremely effective, but I like to be extremely conservative before I say, hey, this is going to wipe something out. But I think it's very safe to say it's going to make combating anything a lot easier. What they work very well for flying root aphids, but we actually have tested them on. There was someone that, what's really incredible is when the lights go out and you turn on the predators, the flying root aphids land right on the predators. It's kind of like a best case scenario. They come right to it. We've got documented footage of them all like sitting all across predators. And there was a fellow that did this for 3 days, and then a couple days later had them completely dead everywhere. Now, root aphids could be impossible to beat like that, because like an adult can spend its whole life in the medium still. Like just they don't have to leave. But it's just, I believe for flying, anything that is flying, it brings them to them. And the same thing with predator bugs, why predator bugs would be a waste of money, because you're going to wipe them out. You're going to screw up their RNA and DNA so they're not functioning properly anyways.
Got it. Okay. And you mentioned you run them during night. Why wouldn't you run them during the day?
Just because it's so much easier for the bugs to see it, because while the light is on, it's a lot harder. But when the lights are out, even though it's so low wattage to our eyes, it's just like they're attracted to it. Like I came across, like this is a video done years ago that's talking about UV and that how insects see UV. Like I actually really like having them, like say if you've got an entrance to a facility, having these in like a bunch of just the doorways of the entrance, so that you can use them multiple times in the middle of darkness. So if something does come in, you have a good chance of disabling them from being able to reproduce already. So if they do make it in the room, they do die out. Yeah, I stand by, like, I think that, it's just like anything. It takes a little bit to catch on, but we sell a lot every single day. And I believe it's just evolving to the point, well, like in all my years of growing, what is the worst thing to do when you're growing? It's spraying. Everybody hates spraying pesticides. Like I hate it. It's kind of nice when, I guess, if it's like an essential oil that makes you smell like a spa afterwards, would be about the one exception, but there's very little products that are like that. But it's one of the worst things to do. So to just, I still think there's always going to be a place to use essential oils with alcohol. It's because it's friendly. It doesn't hurt the plants. And you can pass any type of testing when you're using it. And just because the bottom line is alcohol with essential oils can just kill a lot of stuff on contact. So just using that the day that you plant or the day before you flip, even if you don't see anything, I still recommend it.
Well, it sounds like the UVC definitely makes things a lot easier when it comes to pest elimination. I'm going to have to try it out for myself. Okay, so we had some technical difficulties. My internet actually went out. It is a brand new day. Those of you watching on YouTube see that I'm in new clothing, so I wanted to address that first. Let's pick up the conversation where we left off. I want to get into Under-Canopy Lighting next. Now, this is something that seems like more and more people are talking about and more people are using over recent years. Talk to us all about Under-Canopy Lighting. Is it worth it?
Yeah, it's one thing that when it first came out, we were I wasn't so sure about it just because of the science of it and light shooting up. And but we have so many different clients that after using it, like we've had dozens and dozens of clients that were using it, and just the results are actually kind of mind-blowing. I think it's really safe to say that if you're a skilled grower, you're going to make a 20 to 40% gain in your yield in the same square footage, and at the same time turn C's into B's, turn B's into A's, and correct that discoloration throughout your canopy, because anybody knows when you're harvesting how it's just so the color's completely different. And on the other flip side of that is like when you're also harvesting, you realize that the plant is all dead and not doing well underneath. And what it actually does is giving that added heat basically almost stabilizes the VPD and just makes your plants just way more happy.
I've always wondered if it was actually worth it or not, and seeing 20 to 40% gain is pretty significant. I feel like a lot of commercial growers are introducing it because of that. But how about home growers, those folks that have just, 4x4 or 4x8 tint? Would you still say it's worth it for them?
I definitely think so, especially if you have multiple tents. Just testing one, anybody that I have seen that's ever added them in has continued to keep on adding them. I actually believe that the future could be more of less wattage up top, lighting on the side and underneath for really just pushing the limits of it. Because basically, we're about to start doing a whole bunch of tests. Like we have Under-Canopy lighting that's about to land. So it's going to be really interesting to be able to just even test 240 watts underneath with 2 bars versus 4 bars dimmed down to 240 watts to kind of see, does this make a difference, giving uniformity right through the middle and the sides. Because another huge weakness in rooms is upper side lighting. Anywhere, like if you have a big lit room, well, it's going to have awesome uniformity anywhere until there's a wall. And where that wall is, it drops off dramatically. Having upper side lighting is going to be a huge game changer for people in that sense too. And all you have to do is just look on the outside part where you have a wall, look at your medicine flowers, and then compare it to the other side, and you'll see that it's just so much weaker.
So you mentioned 240 watts. Is that per fixture?
No, that's basically there are 120 watts per fixture, and we've been seeing people that actually add 2 to 3 underneath. For most of the R&D that I've seen, it's been with 2, but we've heard like if you have the power and depending on the size of the plants, people that have had 3. But that's some stuff that we're also going to be doing trials with, where we'll have 2 versus 3, 2 versus 4, different wattages, same wattages. We're about to just really see how far you can push it. We have actually a client that can actually get 10 pounds. I know this sounds crazy, but actually pulls 10 pounds per 16 square feet, but they grow vertically. So they actually have lights all the way around it. So they actually they're pushing a lot of wattage, but they're limited to square footage, but nothing in restricting them in height. So for the cost of the power, it totally makes sense for them. And a lot of people with a lot of licensing, they come up with these really dumb rules where it's either plant counts or square footage and stuff like that. And so it's basically just being able to take advantage of it, of all the space and loopholes.
So these 120 watt fixtures, how long are they? And then where do you actually, you place them underneath, but like how far away are they from the plants?
Well, so there's a lot of different designs. Actually, out of over the 30 fixtures that we've made, we spent more time designing this, and we actually had 4 different molds, and we kept on kind of going back and forth. We actually started with a plastic housing. It's still aluminum inside, but we started with plastic just for the risk of like a shock, and then it just kept on. Then I saw a lot of people coming out with aluminum and glass, and then we wanted to do it aluminum and glass, and then we ran into issues with if a driver, when you're not using a non-isolated driver, and if it ever fails and it's attached to aluminum, it could cause a shock. So we had to come up with a different way to make it really safe. And then we decided to make it seamless. So most Under-Canopy have like a seamless connection. So it just plugs in nice and clean and can go the whole way through. Well, we came up with a floating design. Most people have it where it's mounted like to some sort of thing or resting on it. Well, we had it so it's a way of making them float. And when we tested that, we used some really high-powered fans, and we just to kind of see how it could handle it. And we noticed that having a seamless connection looked like a warranty nightmare for us because you get a little bit of pressure. And what we've seen and heard from other people is actually other competitors or some people are having issues because pressure on those where the connections are, and it's causing lights to turn on and all different types of issues. So, ours are 44 inches basically, and they have like a little connection so that you can just continue to daisy chain, and it kind of eliminates that one part of it.
Got it. Wow. Yeah, I'm gonna have to check it out. Sounds promising. as far as the results that people are getting.
Yeah, there was actually one other thing that I could add to about the Under-Canopy, and a lot of people like to use, or majority of the industry uses a heavy, deep red spectrum, and because it's highly efficient. And what I actually believe is that it actually penetrates through the leaf and is getting caught, because there's no other explanation. Because it clearly, when you're shooting, it's not, the light is not hitting from above, and so I think it's really important. I've criticized deep red spectrums in the past, but I do think there's a place for them when it comes to under canopy, and also when it comes into like greenhouse situations, because with greenhouse, you have, even on a cloudy day, you have all different types of supplemental light that fills in the spectrum. So even if it looks like on paper, when you're looking at it like it's just a thin spectrum or very small, outside it's actually filled in.
Yeah, I can imagine that some of these new folks who are implementing these, they could be potentially making mistakes with this because it is so new. So thank you for going into details on how big the lighting is, wattage, distance, so on and so forth. Now, speaking of mistakes, there are a lot of mistakes that new growers can make that relate to lighting. Can you talk to us about some of those and how they can be corrected or avoided for better results?
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest mistakes that's made with LED lighting is intensity. Like, too much or less is more in so many different cases. And being able to measure the light is really, really important. The only problem is there's so many tools for measuring the light that aren't accurate. And that's a big problem. A lot of them don't read far red, and a lot of them can read like 200 to 300 ppfd less than it should. So like having something like an apogee meter that can read from 400 to 750 nanometer, that can pick up the full spectrum, it's priceless, because just to put yourself in an optimum situation for every single stage, down from like a baby to a seedling, like 100 to 120 ppfd is just like the perfect level. And then from going into a teens, 200 to 250 is a great spot. Like in vegging, I actually love 350 ppfd. I think it's just a beautiful sweet spot that the plants love. I don't see much of a reason to go over 500 in any real situation. Like I see people with really large plants that try to like want to give them a little bit more intensity. And then if you're not using supplemental CO2, staying below 800 ppfd is really it's really important. And like if you use too much light, the plants, there's a lot of times will tell you almost right away, by just using slightly too much, you can get purple striping overnight on your stem. If you use way too much, you can get the whole thing purple overnight. I've also seen where the plants like to do like a talking, where the leaves, outside of the leaves, will start closing. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to close and protect themselves from the light. And that's another sign. So just being able to measure the intensity in every single stage will optimize it and up your game huge. Like I've done consulting for some very big, large companies, and it's so rare. I can only think of a couple times in my life when I've come into a room and measured the ppfd and it's been bang on. It's either been too intense where it's hurting them, or they're leaving meat on the table. And if you're only hitting 600 or 700 ppfd in a commercial setting, you are way under what the true potential you could be yielding would be.
I've definitely made that mistake in the past where I just burnt the crap out of my plants from too high of light. And yeah, dimming it down, not only is it reducing the amount of intensity that your plants are getting and your plants aren't struggling at that point, but it's expanding the life of the fixture, right? If you're running it at less than the full capacity.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's just, when I go back years and years ago, I realized that, hey, we were having issues with light intensity in veg, and we didn't know, because we had these huge plants and they were way too close to the lights, and we were blaming everything else but the light.
Oh, wow, that's funny. Now, you mentioned measuring PAR. One of the things I wanted to ask you about, get your thoughts on those phone apps that do PAR measurements. Are you familiar with any of those? Are they accurate or not?
I am actually, and you know what? Now that I think about it, I can quickly look at what it's called, because there's one out of all of them that I find works better than the rest, and it's called PPFD meter grow light. And what I find, what's really weird about it is, because you have all different options to put different types of spectrums and sunlight and everything, and the stock option that says sunlight with 6500K seems to work the closest to an apogee meter. And this is based off using an Android phone, but we've seen anywhere from like usually around 100 to 150 ppfd within it with an apogee meter. So that's the one that I like to go off. And for whatever reason, like if you put it on what the spectrum would actually be closest to, it does not read accurately. But for whatever reason, sunlight at 6500K seems to do that. And I would take that all day, every day over not using it. Like there's just, it's so easy. And once you start measuring it, you can't stop because you can just, it's just giving you that extra edge.
That's good to know. I personally haven't had a chance to mess around with any of the phone apps. I have an apogee meter myself. I had a couple different the apogee meters. I heard the spot on meter was pretty good as well. But yeah, dialing in that light distance, it can be so important. And having a par meter, although they are expensive, I mean, I think I spent over $500 for mine. It helps dial things in and make sure that you're not giving too much light to your plants, or like you said, not enough to where you're leaving some meat on the table.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I want to actually transition over and ask a question, not really related to lighting, but more so of your personal preference. Strains, getting into particular of strains. Name the top 3 strains that you've grown and what you liked about them.
Okay. Yeah, we're in Canada, where I'm from. I think there's a big issue with name or renaming cultivars, or like someone having the same name. So just because I say a name does not necessarily mean it is the exact same name. But well, the one cultivar that I had the most experience with, and I had over probably 20 seasons on YouTube at one point growing it, was Death Bubba. So I have close to 100 runs with this cultivar, and I monocropped it across multiple facilities for over 10 years. So it's just and a lot of my American friends that have tried it would say, oh, this is heavy OG lineage with a touch of cookies and a little something else. Like it's a special cultivar that I'd done very, very well for it. And I have tried hunting for years, like in certain places, trying to find something to replace it. And in my whole commercial production, I couldn't ever find anything to replace it. So that was my number one. There was another one that was a Master Kush. And again, like there's so many different MKs and MKUs. This was a special one that had a very high level of THCV, the highest levels that we had ever seen in anything. And what was also very unique about this cultivar, it didn't get any purple. It would just go yellow. There was no purple no matter what you did. It was so anytime when someone tried to say, hey, I've got this, I could tell instantly that it's not, because it's got purple in it. That's definitely not the cultivar that I'm looking with. And it was just a special cultivar, and I lost it, and it hurt when I lost it because I loved it. I didn't grow it as much because I was getting the same, or it didn't yield as much as Death Bubba, but it was worth about the same. So it came down to a financial reasons why we weren't growing it back then. And then the last one is an old school one that goes back to the late 90s. That was the original BC hash plant that I don't like. If you're from Canada, or even I would say a lot of people in California would have had the BC hash plant like in the early 2000s still. And it just this beautiful cultivar. The only way I know how to explain it is it just coats your mouth with this flavor. Like I was told that it was a cross between an Afghan and a Northern Lights cultivar, but I don't really know. I knew that we grew it a couple times, and I knew multiple people that grew it over the years, and it just died out. But I would consider it the most valuable cultivar out there in the world right now. If I would pay big bucks to be able to get a cut of it back.
Well, all right. Yeah, I've been asking that question recently because there's a lot of folks here that are shopping for genetics and asking the guests here what their favorites are. It definitely allows people to do some research and maybe pick up some things for themselves. So before we end this, I do want to ask you what the future looks like. You work in the lighting industry. You've been in there for a while now. You've clearly had a passion for it for a very, very long time. A lot of people say that lighting has kind of topped out now, and there's really not much further it can go. However, there are people that debate that. What do you think the future looks like for the lighting industry?
Well, I think just like everything, it's evolving quick, and I believe spectrum tuning is coming in a big way. Like at this point, it's already evolved where you can get a spectrum tuning light for the same price as a single channel light. So I just think that is a huge thing. I think UVC is coming in a big way, and same with UVB. Everybody knows the worst part of any type of job when it comes to cultivation is spraying, and just eliminating that and the contaminations. Nobody wants that. So I think that is a huge way using UVB to enhance your COAs is going to be a huge thing. Under-Canopy, it's making things a lot more profitable for people. So I think that's coming in a big way. Like a lot of people are resisting it, and it's kind of funny because once you see them try it, they're right on board right away. So I think that's kind of like the future.
Do you foresee AI getting involved in lighting at all? Like one of the things that I've talked about on a podcast in the past is like, how cool would it be if your lights actually had some sort of sensor to where they could see the plants and detect if there was some sort of problem, like too much light, for example, and then it would automatically adjust and send you an alert. There's a bunch of different things AI wise that probably could be incorporated into the lights. Do you foresee anything like that happening soon?
I do think, I don't know how soon, but I already know it's already started, like that there is AI that's coming that can analyze the plants, and if there's any type of disease or anything going on, it's going to report it. Like, I think there is so much to do with spectrum tuning also, well, just to find the true potential of each cultivar by using different spectrums. So having AI incorporated in that and playing a part in it, I think it is coming in a big way. Like it will be able to catch something when there's a problem way before it happens. Like I don't know the name of a company, but I've already heard of it's a very expensive unit where it's some sort of like camera system that goes back and forth and takes imaging, and it's able to track, like find if you've got bugs or insects. So it's like it's doing a really good job, and it's a subscription. I don't have that much information, but I was recently hearing someone telling me about that. I'm going, wow, that's really taking things to another level. Well, it's like you're seeing with big tractors where they're using electricity and zapping weeds. So it's like, that like more, there's going to be more innovative ways, I think, of treating insects and combating different stuff. Like there's breakthroughs on fighting mold. And I think, AI, I think actually is going to play a major role.
That's so cool. Yeah, that would probably make things a lot easier for gardeners. Awesome. Well, we are getting up to the hour mark here. If not, we might have already passed it. But we wanted to wrap things up here. Can you tell the listeners how they can find you and what you have upcoming in the future?
Okay. Well, I do have a YouTube channel. There's been probably over 1,500 videos removed from it at this point, but it is alive still at Grandmaster level on YouTube. On Instagram, it's Grandmaster level. And for right now, we have some pretty cool collaborations. We're actually working with Mercules from Death Row Records. He's a Canadian artist, and we're actually making Mercs. And those are these glasses right here. And it's actually a really high quality pair of glasses. We actually license the same frames that Prada is using, and it gives you awesome protection against the sun or the grow room. So like being in there, you got to protect your eyes, man. These lights are so bright. So that's a really exciting thing that we have upcoming. We've also been working on a UVB UVA bar that controls them both independently. That will be an add-on to every light. We're hoping to have that done in a month. And we've also been working on a microgreen kit where I actually had an idea to make a light fit in a 10-inch, or a set of lights fit in a 10-inch by 20-inch tray. So basically you can get 4 trays come with it, and the light folds out. And anywhere where you have a 2x4 space, you're going to be able to grow microgreens. And we've come up with a new medium, actually, that's a cloth that's actually mold and UV resistant that you can grow in. One of the hardest things with microgreens is mold. So, and also the other equation to that is it's going to come with seeds. And as it stands right now, there's a couple companies that almost have a monopoly in the United States when it comes to microgreen seeds. We're going to try to end that. Well, we are going to end that, and we're going to make it way more affordable. So when someone buys it, they can grow crop after crop after crop and be really affordable for people. That's kind of what we have coming up in the next few months.
That's awesome. Definitely some exciting things there. Yeah, I was going to ask you about your YouTube channel. I remember you having like tons and tons of videos, and I wasn't sure if they canceled one channel and you had to start a new one, or what happened there.
Do you remember when it was like everybody's channel was getting deleted?
Yeah, 2018.
Yeah, so like there was a point where I did 111 live streams in a row where we would have over a 500 person live audience, 111 weeks, and if I would used to put a video within 24 hours, I'd get 5,000 to 10,000 views. And when then it all started, almost everybody I knew was losing their channel. Like even when NV Closet Med Grower lost his channel, like at that time, so we just started removing everything and then going back to Zoom. And then I've never been able to get it remonetized. So I actually just started a new channel too, also Grandmaster LEDs, that we were going to just try to do things because like anytime I do something, getting complaints that, hey, I've been removed, or I'm not getting a notification, or like I can't reach anybody on it. It's pretty frustrating.
That is super frustrating. Yeah, that was a rough time back then. I'm glad that most people got their channels back. I don't think 100% of the people got their channels back, but most did. So yeah, we can only hope it gets better from there. But I'll definitely have a link to Thomas's YouTube channel down in the YouTube description section below, so you can easily get to it and subscribe to his channel. I want to give a big thanks to the folks supporting on Patreon, patreon.com/Mr. Growit. The folks being scrolled on the screen right now are in the producer tier. Special thanks to you. You help keep this podcast going. Well, Thomas, once again, thanks so much for coming on to this. This has been very insightful for me. I've learned so much. I'm definitely going to have to replay this and make sure I'm grasping onto all the information that was thrown through this episode here. And yeah, man, appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure and honor, and I'm looking forward to doing something in the future with you.
Absolutely. All right, everyone, we'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll catch you in the next episode. Peace out.